Hey guys, so today I just wanted to hop on and tell you guys about some series that I either don't hear about on Booktube or have never heard about on Booktube. I think there's 4 or 5 books. When I say books, some of them are series, but I'm just gonna say book. And when I talk about the books, I will be putting a picture of them up because a lot of these books are either at the e-version or I read it from the library. Yeah, so I'm just gonna get right into it. But before I start, I just want to say you might hear some noises coming from outside, either honking horns, or you might hear people yelling. That's because outside there is a protest for the democracy of Hong Kong, I'm pretty sure, going on downstairs. And even though we're 20 plus stories up, you might still hear some of that sometimes, so I apologize. But it's an important issue, so I'm not bothered by it. I just thought I'd let you guys know in case you hear it and you're wondering what in the world is going on. That is what's going on. And the honking is because they're holding signs that say honk for, I think it says honk for Hong Kong democracy, is I think what the signs say. So yeah. Anyhow, I'm gonna get right into the video. So the first book that I'm going to be talking about is a YA fantasy. This book is called Awakens. It's by Elise Kova. Another one of her books is I've seen on Booktube before is I think it's called Alchemist of the Loom. I've never read it, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. And so I've seen that one on Booktube. That one is an adult fantasy, but I have not seen Awakens, which is a young adult fantasy. It is basically about a girl who has been living in the palace, the royal palace, since she was 12, and she is 17, 18 now, and she has been working for the past, how many years is that, 5 or 6 years. She's been working that many years in the library. She's just been a library's apprentice, and then one day something happens and she figures out that she has powers, and the first book is basically about her deciding if she's going to keep the powers or not. Spoiler alert, she keeps the powers. I shouldn't say that. And the whole series is basically about her going from her being a shy librarian to her being like this badass person who can bend a specific element. It's air. I don't think that's a spoiler because the book is called Awakens. Yeah, so she bends air. The powers are kind of similar to Avatar: The Last Airbender in the sense that like everyone has their own. Everybody who's a mage has their own element. So there's fire, water, air, earth, and those are basically what's explored. But however, there's a different type of magic in the world that kind of gets explained later in the book. But that doesn't really come into play in this series. There's a spin-off series that it kind of comes more into play with, but for this series it's just the 4 elements basically. And yeah, it was just really interesting, and it has a really cute romance, and though the romance might be kind of cliche, sometimes I'm a sucker for those cliche romances and I can't help it. Yeah, so the next book we'll be talking about is a contemporary novel. It is called The Paris Wife by Paula Mclain. All these books will be in the description, by the way. So The Paris Wife, Paula Mclain, it is basically about Ernest Hemingway's first wife. I think he was married 3 times. And it's about his first wife and basically the struggles that she went through being married to him, and she's called the Paris wife because they spent most of their time, most of their married life, though they were married in America, they spent most of it in Paris. And she's like the wife that like famously like lost his papers on the train, or lost his books on the train. Yeah, I really liked it. I cried multiple times. If you read the book, you might not cry. I'm just a big baby sometimes. So yeah, I cried multiple times, and it was really sad. But it was also, it was kind of about being with someone who is tortured and how you deal with that and how it can hurt you on the inside. Being with someone who has so many other loves and hatreds in his life, and yeah. It was just really interesting to me. They don't end up together, obviously, because he has 2 other wives after her. and it is a fiction novel, so it's not it's just based on what people have speculated her life to be like. But the woman did do a lot of research, so yeah, that will be my second novel that I would recommend to people. The third book I'm going to be recommending is another series. It's called Blade and Rose. Blade and Rose, yeah, it's called Blade and Rose. It's by Miranda Honfleur. The book is basically about a girl named Brielle. She's been living in a magic academy for 13 years, since she was 13, so she's 26 now in the book. And her best friend took a job with the royal family as like the royal family's healer, because there's like different types of magic you can do in this book. There's like healing magic, elemental magic, but everybody, it seems like, from what I can understand from the book, it seems like everybody can do any kind of magic. They specialize when they're really young. So Brielle is an elemental mage, so she works with the elements, but her best friend Olivia is a healing mage, and so she took a job with the royal family to basically just be their personal healer. And Brielle hasn't heard from Olivia in a long time, and so she's starting to worry about Olivia. But she is hesitant to go see Olivia. She also has a fiance who needs her blood every month for a reason. I think it's explained pretty early on, but I'm still not going to ruin it. He needs her blood every month. They don't get along very well, but still she doesn't want him to go without her blood. And anyhow, so she wants to go see her best friend, and then one day a paladin who's basically like what is he? He's like a paladin who is like a priest warrior, is the best way I can think of to describe him. He ends up coming to the magic school because he's on his way to get his paladin stats revoked for reasons he doesn't know, and Brielle is ordered to help him get to the place where they're going to revoke his paladin stats, which Brielle readily agrees to because she wants to go see her friend. So she thinks this is a good opportunity. She'll go with him. And then after she drops him off, she can then go to the palace, which is pretty close to the place where she's going to be dropping him off. And so yeah, so she agrees to do it. And this book is basically about their journey to get to where he needs to go, trying to figure out why he's having his paladin status revoked. And she's trying to figure out what happened to her best friend. Yeah, I really like the series. I would definitely recommend it. It's an adult fantasy. And it isn't too popular. I don't think I've ever heard about it on Booktube, but it is one of my favorite series. The next book I'm going to be talking about is a nonfiction. It's called The Race to Save the Romanovs. The next book I'm going to be talking about is a nonfiction, and it's called The Race to Save the Romanovs. I'm not going to pronounce this author's name right, but I'm going to give it a shot, by Helen Rappaport. Anyhow, the book, actually, I think there are two other books. Like, it's a nonfiction book, but I'm pretty sure there are two other books, that she's also written about the Romanovs that she wrote before this book. And the book that she wrote before this one, which is called something about the Romanov sisters, Lost Lives of the Romanov sisters. I think that one was pretty popular, but this one I haven't heard anything about. The Race to Save the Romanovs, and it is basically like a collection of letters and different people's accounts of things that people tried to do to save the Romanov family before they fell. Yeah, and I just found it really interesting. I mean, I can't really say much more about it, and people know that happened to the Romanov family. The Romanov family was a Russian monarchy, was part of the Russian monarchy that was killed. Well, it was the Russian monarchy that was killed. A lot of people know it because of a lot of people know it because it was a bad thing. But I know, me personally, when I'd heard of the Romanovs was from the movie when I was younger, Anastasia, the animated movie Anastasia, and also there was a mystery of what happened to Anastasia, though her bones were found, but there's still this misconceived notion that Anastasia was never found. And anyhow, I would definitely recommend this book if you're into history. I personally really like reading about the Russian Revolution. Which is an honorable mention. I'll mention A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor, which is a fiction novel that takes place in Russia during the revolution. Good novels to pair together. I read them at the same time. Which takes place during the Russian Revolution. I'm not going to go too much into that one, but it's basically about a poet that gets put on house arrest in the Metropole Hotel, which is a real hotel in Russia, which is just like a really high-end hotel, and he gets put in house arrest in that hotel for some things that he wrote about in a poem. So yeah, but anyways, The Race of the Romanovs, I would definitely recommend it 100%, especially if you like reading about history or revolutions, especially because it's kind of a recent revolution. I just found it really interesting. So yeah. The third book / series I'm going to be recommending is another adult fantasy. It is called, what is it called? It's another adult fantasy. This one is a little more popular, so people might have heard of it, especially if you're into like the whole fairy thing. And that's A Daughter of the Forest by Juliet Marillier, I think is how you pronounce her name. And to me, I don't know if this is true, but I think this is like the person who really like kicked off the whole fairy thing. The Daughter of the Forest and her books in that series came out in the 1990s, if I'm not mistaken. And it's basically, it's not the kind of fairy that you read about in Court of Thorn and Roses or anything like that. I've never read those books, but I know that the fairies in that book are more, the more like love interest sort of things. The fairies in this book are kind of like what you read about in the mythology. Like they're kind of the tricksters, or like you feel like you have to trade something to get to. If they offer you something, there's always like a cost to it. They don't give you anything for free. Is kind of what the fairies and the fae are like in this book. And so basically the story is based off an Irish fairy tale. And what happens is this 12-year-old girl, she has 6 older brothers. She's a princess. Her father's the king. Her mother is dead. The king remarries. The woman he remarries turns out to be a sorceress. And she places a curse on her 6 brothers to turn them into swans. And the main character manages to get away, but while she's stumbling through the forest, some being from the Fae approaches her and tells her that she can save all of her brothers if she makes them shirts out of a certain material. It's like this certain plant, which I don't know if the plant is real. I also don't remember the name of the plant. But it's kind of like it'd be like making shirts out of like cacti. It is like a plant that has a lot of like spiky bits to it. So if she makes the shirts out of this, her hands are going to be severely damaged. It's going to be extremely painful. And not only that, but if she does, while she's making the shirts, she is not allowed to speak. So until the shirts are finished and placed on her brother's heads, she cannot speak. And it's just a really interesting book. There is like trigger warning for sexual assault that does happen in the book, but the book really does just emphasize what it's like. She's all alone in the forest, and it emphasizes what she goes through. And it's really interesting because the book placed a lot of emphasis on her in the beginning of the first few chapters. The book places a lot of emphasis on how much she loves the forest, but then like as this all happens, then you think that she would have like a sour taste in her mouth for the forest because she has spent all these years alone in the forest. But it really is I think it's called A Daughter of the Forest because she truly loves the forest. And I loved reading it because the storytelling, the ways that the author retells certain tales that have been told in Celtic mythology, I found that really interesting. And just hearing that, she writes in such a beautiful way. That even though some of the things that are happening in the book aren't very nice, the beautiful way in which she writes about like the nature around her especially, and the way she tells stories, it's just amazing. And that's why I loved the book. It's also a series. This one is definitely my favorite one. Yeah, I think the first 3 would be my favorites in the series, but the number 1 is definitely my all-time favorite of the series. The next book I'm going to talk about is another nonfiction, and that is going to be Saving the Mona Lisa by Gerri. And this book is basically about what it sounds like. It's about saving the Mona Lisa. It's about during World War II, when all of the artifacts in the Louvre had to be moved because German occupation was happening in France, and they knew that it was coming. So it talks about basically how the how the curators of the museum managed to move the paintings and how they kept it under wraps. And they talk about things like having to move to like abandoned castles and sleep with some people would sleep like rolled up like Monets underneath their pillows, just because they were so afraid someone would break into the house and kill them. And it says saving the Mona Lisa, but it talks about a lot more than the Mona Lisa. It talks about all the artwork that was in the Louvre and what the artist did to save it. I have especially like, I really liked it. I really like art. I'm getting a minor in art history with my archaeology degree, so I just found it extra interesting because like archaeology, it was like preserving these paintings that have so much meaning behind them. So I found it especially interesting. Yeah, I found it really interesting. If you're interested in art, or even if you're interested in just like the occupation of Germany in Paris during World War II, it was just a very interesting read to read about how they moved the paintings, the materials they needed to use to move the paintings, the efforts that some of the curators went into to save the paintings would be surprising to many. It was surprising to me because I can't imagine, even if I worked in a museum, I can't imagine trying to save something and being killed over it. Because like, as I say in the book, like people that were caught holding these paintings, so the Germans wanted the paintings. So people that were caught trying to hide these paintings got into a lot of trouble. And so I can't imagine risking my life. And some of these curators left their families for like 3 years because they knew that, because they believed that protecting these paintings was more important to humanity than being with their families, which I found shocking. Not saying I necessarily agree with it, but I found it shocking, the lengths that people went through to basically save this culture and to save the paintings. That is it for what I have for the video. Yeah, I should have another video coming out in a couple of days. I'm doing a reading vlog for the first week of July, and then I'm going to be talking about some books that Booktube recommended to me. So yeah, I have some fun videos coming up. So if you want to like and subscribe, that would be awesome, and I will see you guys next time.